All right, what's going on, everybody? Ryan Ogren here, and today we're going to be going through what makes land valuable for data centers, and then specifically what makes land valuable for AI data centers. If you own land, or maybe you're a data center developer and you're trying to get a deal done, this is for you. And for those that don't know, I'm Ryan Ogren. I'm a private equity investor in the data center infrastructure and power infrastructure space. I didn't always know this industry. I came from outside this industry. I actually didn't know what a substation was, what a transformer was, what a data center was, what a server, what a rack, what anything was in this industry. I actually am a former pro baseball player, so I had to learn this entire industry from the ground up. And the reason I'm making these videos is because there's not a lot of content out there when it comes down to developing these AI data centers. And I think everyone needs to really get on the same page as far as what we're looking for. But also at the same time, I need to attract more people, more younger people to this industry. There's not a lot of, I'm 28 at the time of recording this video, there's not a lot of 28-year-olds out there that are in this space, and I think that's going to be a huge problem for us down the road because we're building assets and infrastructure that my generation is going to have to take care of instead of the folks that are actually building these things. I'm making these videos for that and also for deal flow. We make our deals, or we make our money doing deals, and so if you have a site and you want us to take a look at it, I'll put a link below. You can just enter in, contact us, and we'll come in and we'll take a look at your site. And if it's worthwhile to us and it makes sense and we can help you, we'll structure a deal with you. That's up to you guys. So without further ado, let's get into this. All right, what makes land valuable for data centers? So there's 5 critical factors that I would say, and there's more than just this, but these are like the main ones that we go through when we're evaluating a site. And once again, everybody's site criteria is different. This is mostly, because we spend most of our time in the hyperscale side of things, which is the big campuses, the big announcements that you see all the time on the news. This could change for smaller scale data centers for sure. Okay, so I'm talking like AI data center campuses or mega data center campuses. Inside the industry, they call them hyperscale. There's pretty much 5 critical factors. 1 is the actual size and expandability of the land itself. 2 is power availability. 3 is water access. 4 is zoning and permits. And then 5 is fiber connectivity. And I rank these myself. So this is just, in my opinion, what I look for. Okay, so I'm going to break down each one of these for you guys so you understand why these factors are playing into the valuation of the actual site. Okay, so number 1 is the size and expandability. These hyperscale campuses are massive. If you look at the one down in Louisiana that Meta's doing, it's the size of Manhattan. All right, and the reason they want the size here and they want the acreage is because they need to be able to expand that facility if they need to. And the reason that's so important is because we don't know what AI is going to, we don't know how it's going to develop and what's going to happen, but we do know that we do not want to constrain. And there's obviously different rules and different beliefs around that. But when it comes down to if it's a product, you do not want the infrastructure to be a bottleneck. And if you're going to build in one area, you're going to spend all this money, all this capex to build a data center. You also want to make sure that it has the future expandability that is going to be required potentially in the future. That size and expandability is huge because if you can't expand outside a certain footprint, that particular site's not going to be used, or it doesn't make sense for an investment in a scalable capex. It's not really an investment asset. It's really just supplying the demand for right now. But then down the road, they're going to have to go buy another site and handle all that, the investment then, and spend that capex. So it really makes more sense to have that expandability on, especially in these AI data centers. But at the same time, if you model out the deal in the economics, you're going to have to buy a site. You're going to have to actually develop the whole site. You're going to have to go get the grid interconnection. You're going to have to do all these different types of things. And I'll talk about that here in a second for power. You want to make sure that particular parcel, you only have one grid interconnect for that particular parcel, and then you have just a big parcel that you can use and actually use all the power that's coming into that particular parcel. It also helps you from an infrastructure standpoint, where if you just have to, as far as the industry goes, the grid interconnection is a huge bottleneck for these sites coming online. If you understand that, then when you do get a grid interconnection, you want to make sure it's for the biggest site possible so you can use as much power from the grid as possible and as efficiently. So that's another reason why the size and expandability is very important. So now I just hinted at it. Let's go into number 2, which is power availability. I have here written distance to substation and utility capacity, but the main thing is front of the meter power. Okay, so front of the meter power means it's passing through the utility, right? So the local electrical utility is the one that's entered into the PPA, the power purchase agreement, with the end user, the hyperscaler in this particular instance. This is very important because to get front of the meter power to the site, you have to go through something called the grid. The grid is, if you just look outside of your window, my window's over here, if you just look outside and you can see a power line, that's the grid. The grid are these power lines, right? And being able to connect to the power line, it seems relatively simple. It is the most complex process that I've ever had to learn in my business career to date. So you have to, it usually is taking 4 to 7 years at this point in time. In some areas they're saying 2 years, but then they just keep moving their timelines back. So I'll do a full video on grid interconnects and the grid interconnect process in the areas that I've been in. Just know the things that you guys need to know is the grid interconnect is so important. These hyperscalers, these end users, these data center tenants, these AI data centers, everybody wants to make sure they have front of the meter power or they have a grid interconnect, because that ensures that this site is going to be a good investment for the long term. And that means when new power generation comes on, that the power generation in any other spot that's connected to that grid, they might have access to, which is super, super beneficial for that site and just the economics of it. So power availability, they want front of the meter power, but then how much of that power, and then when they're going to get that power, and then the cost of that power. If I just said, if there, and this, now we're going to get a little bit more technical. If there's like let's say it's a 138 kilovolt line that's outside of my site, and I'm requesting 1 gigawatt of power from the utility. A gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. The cost of that power, not only is it going to be the cost of the power itself, but also the cost of all the upgrades around that grid, because that 138 kV line is, chances are it's not going to be able to handle the gigawatt of power that I just requested. So the utility is going to have to give me a quote to upgrade the actual lines, to upgrade and put a substation on site, because then they upgrade the lines, and then I'm going to have to step that power, that voltage back down, so I have a substation on site so I can actually use that power with my data centers. All of that right there, that particular process, is the thing that costs a lot of money. And a lot of developers and a lot of landowners do not understand that once they go and they get a grid interconnect, the utility is probably going to slap you with about $10 to $20 million, depending on the upgrades after the fact, that it's going to be required to actually deliver that power. So that's a big one, the cost of the power, because once again, they're modeling out all these different economics, and then when you get that power. So the utilities, there's not a lot of power to go around now. So there's a lot of power generation projects happening out there, but how much power can you get, and then when can you get it delivered by? You'd be surprised at how far out they're actually delivering this power. Realistically, a 3-year interconnect to get 200 megawatts and then up to a 10-year ramp to a gigawatt is like something that I've seen in the past. And a ramp just means they're going to give you this amount of power in X time frame, and then this amount of power in X time frame, this amount of power in X time frame, and then it just ramps all the way up till you have maximum load. And this can be years. It really can be years. But they call that the load ramp, and it's required to be able to do a deal. And so anyways, power availability, just to boil it down, these end users and these tenants and these AI data centers, the hyperscalers, they want front of the meter power. And I'm recording this in November of 2025. It could change. If it changes, I'll do a new video. But I just see so many people saying, oh, we have a behind the meter solution. We have all this gas on the site. And there, you can do something with that for sure. And we've done something with that, and we have a strategy around that, but you're still going to have that front of the meter component. And I'll do a full video on why, but for now, we'll just leave it at that. But also, you're going to need redundancy, power redundancy. So if you have a gigawatt site, chances are you're also going to need another gigawatt of power, just redundant, in case something happens to the main power source. So they have different setups, N+1, N-1, N+2 redundancies, and they mean different things, but just pretty much say, if you have a site that's a gigawatt of power, you're probably going to need that amount of power as a redundancy, which is the most expensive part of building out these data centers, in my opinion. Because most of the time, the redundancies are behind the meter redundancies. So if you have a gigawatt coming from the grid, you'll also have a gigawatt of gas on site from a gas pipeline, and a gigawatt worth of reciprocating engines, gensets, or even natural gas that is able to, if something happens with the grid or the service from the grid, that they're able to actually generate their own power behind the meter until the grid gets back online. This is like required across AI data centers, and it's required on most data centers as well. So this is probably the most expensive part, because these generators, these recips, these turbines are very expensive right now. Not to mention gas laterals, midstream laterals are about $1 million per mile, and then all the gas that comes through them. So if you model out what's the most expensive power, it's by far behind the meter power is way more expensive than front of the meter power from the utility. And just the reason being is because you're actually having to build the generation asset. And building power plants ain't cheap. Power availability, you not only need front of the meter power, but you also need redundancy, and that is super important. And so already, if you're watching this video and you have raw land and you just want to sell it as raw land, I think you can see why these sites go for so much, because there's so much work that has to go into it. Once again, if you guys want us to take a look at the site, or if you want us to put together these deals with your site, comment below and we'll reach out, or go to our website in the link below and fill out a form, and we'll be able to do that in here in a second. Or we'll be able to reach out and then learn more about your site and go from there. So then number 3, there's so many different other things that we could talk about with power, but I'll just leave it at that. Those are the main ones. And then number 3 is water access. Water access is so important, especially for AI data centers. If you watched my other videos on AI data centers, if you didn't, go back and watch. Maybe I can put a link on it somewhere here. The reason they need so much power and they use so much more power than a traditional data center is because of the chips that go in the servers. The new NVIDIA AI chips, they take up 7 times the amount of power that a typical CPU chip does. So the GPU chips versus the CPU chips, I did a whole video on that. And the reason this is so important is that means each particular chip is 5 to 7x times the power consumption of a traditional chip. That means, do that math, there's 8 chips in a server or something like that, and then there's 10 servers in a rack. You have 80 AI chips that are 5 to 7 times the power consumption of a CPU chip in one rack, and then there's thousands of these racks in a data center, in an AI data center, and even hundreds of thousands in an actual campus. You can see how much power is being used. And because there's more power being used by these servers, you need a different way to cool them. Air cooling is the traditional way that these data centers would be cooled. They actually have raised floors, and there's like there are tiles that you can remove, and then the air will actually blow up through or blow down through the actual rack. And then it goes up, the hot air rises, it goes up into the ceiling, and then it gets recycled back down into the floor. So it just happens like that. And it's pretty cool to see that, but at the same time, it's primitive. And water access is very important because these AI data centers use liquid cooling. So they actually have water run through and set up in the racks, and they have these closed loop systems that are just very cool and very unique and very expensive to build. The infrastructure on these liquid cooling assets is like bananas. It's some of the coolest stuff that I've ever seen, but it does a good job of keeping these data centers cool, but at the same time, like, we just have an immense amount of power coming in and being used that the water access is a very important piece of this. West Texas is like a mind F for me, because there's not a lot of water out in West Texas, but there's so much gas. And so there's a lot of water infrastructure out there by major companies that have been able to do it in the Permian. The Permian's been being developed for decades now. So there is water out there, but it's still just crazy to me how much water these data centers need. 4 million plus gallons a day. Even higher than that, and they're obviously cleaning this water, and they have all this different infrastructure built. But like in West Texas, like, how do they really get water into the desert? And same thing in Arizona, they're having issues with that, but people are figuring it out. Water access is a big one. So these are like the top 3. These are the big ones. And then zoning and permits, you're starting to see a little bit more pushback on the zoning and permitting. A lot of people want a data center and a power plant to be put up next to their homes, and for good reason too. Like, it just buzzes all the time. If there's a legitimate gas power plant that's right next to your house, like, that is cause for concern, and all different types of things. Zoning and permitting is becoming more and more important, and you want to be in states where ideally your legislature, your representatives are very pro-business, and they're pro for data centers and AI. We got very lucky, and a lot of our deals are in like the major hubs of these states, and that's pretty much just all I'm going to say on that. But having local support is very important. And one of the things that we've done in the past, my firm, is negotiating something called a community benefit agreement. So it's a CBA, and it's between the end user or the developer and the actual community, the township. And the reason this is so important is it can most times get the deal across the line, because the township doesn't realize that they can actually benefit from this project as well, exponentially. And so sometimes the amount of money that the township can make from the CBA, which the CBA is a compensation that offsets the damage that the development is doing to the community. And the CBA itself, with these AI data centers, they make a tremendous amount of money. And the CBA can be very lucrative for the township. And they can fix roads, they can fund schools, they can build playgrounds, they can do like a million different things that they otherwise would never have been able to do. And it just really would actually be a net positive for the community at a certain threshold where that monetary amount actually makes sense. You just got to be careful. You don't want to be in a residential place, because then these CBAs don't make sense. but if it's not going to hurt anybody health wise and you still are able to do a CBA, it really just helps out the township more than anything else, and it brings a lot of economic development to that specific area. That's something to look at. We've done this in the past. If you want us to take a look at this particular part, we also have a zoning attorney on our team. So he's a 59-year-old zoning attorney, very seasoned, one of the best in the business. So if you guys need help with this, we can obviously help with that. And then fiber connectivity. I've never had a deal die from not being able to connect to fiber. The fiber guys are very good at doing right-of-ways and easements to get to a site, if that, or they're able to actually go and lay fiber along other right-of-ways and easements that they currently have or that just are already existing. And there's just a ton of fiber that's already existing out there. So we've never lost a site because we haven't been able to connect to fiber. Usually, like, the fiber guys will be able to build to our site. That's just pretty much how we've seen it. Now, it's not going to say that is the case, but that isn't the case for some people in some areas, but that's just how it's been for me. Fiber connectivity is important. Just make sure you take a look at it, but I do have it listed here as number 5. That's pretty much everything. I should have been scrolling through this video, but anyways, there's different multiples on having all these pieces in place versus not, okay? There's something, if we're taking raw land and turning it into powered land and then selling it, that's one thing. A powered land valuation is what on all the news, there's these crazy multiples. I'm not going to say the actual multiples for you, but the land value increases exponentially. Why? You just saw all the hoops you have to jump through to create a powered land solution. But a powered land solution means that the site is energized, the substation, the front of the meter power is there, everything's squared away, you have all the power you need, and they could come in and just start building, or there's already a powered shell there. We say that is pretty much powered land. The current today industry term is almost a step back, where you have all your interconnect agreements, you have maybe a class 5 on all the power you have in certain areas, and then you have your load ramps, you have all your different agreements, you have your offtake agreements, you have your PPA, everything's signed and good to go. That is pretty much, and like the deposits are put down on all the long lead time equipment, and you have all the cost of the upgrades is already taken care of, and the construction's already started on that. I would say that is powered land right then and there. That is probably as close as you can possibly get without actually developing and constructing the data center or the on-site generation yourself. So if you're taking raw land to powered land, that's the end zone. And then anything that's close in that process, you might be able to get a buyer a couple steps off, but in my opinion, in my experience, the utilities have been missing their deadlines. And we love the utilities. If you're a utility guy and you're watching this, I love you. You're the man. You're the woman if you're watching this and you're a woman. But it's just been really challenging for them with the amount of projects that they've seen and the timeframes that they've seen them and the requests that they've seen them and just the dynamics of how they've seen them. It's been hard to figure out which ones are real, which ones are fake, which ones are legit projects, which ones are not, and who has the capital to handle this, plus all the manufacturing lead times that are just so long now. It's been really hard for these utilities to hit their milestones. So because of that, all the buyers, if back in the day, a couple of years ago, you might have seen a hyperscaler buy a site that was in the interconnect load study queue. And it was just commissioned, and they said verbally that they can get this amount of power to the site. But since then, utilities have been missing those deadlines that they've been saying, oh, the study's going to be finished then, the study's going to be finished, the study's going to be finished. And after a few of those, these hyperscalers have been getting burned. They've been getting burned on sites that they bought for crazy multiples, and then they still are waiting for power. So now, that powered land multiple is really coming down to how close you can get from the utility and how much assurance you can get from the utility that these deadlines are true and that power is going to be there when they need it. And there's different ways to do this, and this is the part that my firm has figured out that a lot of people have not been able to figure out. So it's our secret sauce. And if you want to work with us and you're stuck here, fill out the form below and we'll be able to hop on a call and walk you through this process. But really, it's about that assurance. The more assurance and guarantees that you can have that power is going to be there from the meter, from the utility, the better off you're able the better off you'll be when you want to sell your site. So that's that. And the further away from powered land that you are, obviously it's kind of like a football field, a little less step down valuation you're going to have. So a lot of people, though, they want to sell their site for millions and millions, and they just have raw land that has good infrastructure around it. But you can see there's a lot of work that has to go into that. It has the bones, but it doesn't have any muscle or anything else to it just yet. A lot has to go into it, and that is where and other developers, and I'm not saying we're like crazy developers out there. I always tell people we're like developers but without a shovel, because we just are able to do our own structures in these deals. But this is where folks like us come into play. If you have a raw piece of land. It's near power. The infrastructure looks good. You just need to put all these pieces together. And this is the fun part. And it's like really putting like a true puzzle together and a true solution. And it's crazy. This is the time where we're changing the future. We're literally building the future of AI. And it's very important that you take this, if you're watching this video, you take it serious, and that you also like and subscribe. I was gonna say something else very meaningful, but that's all I got. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you like this. Make sure you hit the bell. This is my new YouTube channel, and I'll be putting out content all throughout the month and through my career. And if so, soon we'll be able to disclose the deals that we do. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this, and talk soon.